Oh, hi there. This week we are closing in this door in our kitchen. Now you may be asking yourself, why are you closing in the door that leads to the exterior in your kitchen? Well, we have another door that leads from our kitchen to our Michigan room, which is also known as a sunroom or an all seasons room. And this door in the kitchen is kind of in an awkward location. We're probably gonna be using the sliding glass door more. And closing in this door is also gonna give me more wall space so that I can put more cabinets in the kitchen that I'm planning to build, because the door is currently right in the middle of the kitchen cabinetry and it makes for a pretty awkward layout. On this particular morning, I had some errands to run early in the day. When I got back, Alan was removing the door frame for this door. Now, this is a project we've been talking about for a long time, basically since we got this house, and we were a little intimidated by it. But once he got going, we were already past the point of no return, and I have found that that is the secret for home renovations. You just got to get started, get yourself to the point of no return, then you have to finish it. I'm only halfway joking.
I'd say we're committed.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to put the door back in at this point.
No. And while Alan was working on the door, I was working on the other door, cleaning the track. Now this door is really heavy and it gets stuck on the track. It's just really gunked up. There's a lot of buildup and dirt in there. It was just due for a good cleaning. Now, I've talked in previous videos about how dirty this house has been and how much cleaning we've had to do. Some of that is just, you know, the usual dirt and wear and tear on a house. It's also out in a really rural area, so it just gets dustier. But there were also just, like, there were carpet fibers stuck in this thing from probably 1970 something. And while I was in a cleaning mood, I decided to work on clearing some of the junk that had been accumulating in our all seasons room. Once Alan had the old door frame out, we could start filling in this hole. So we started by attaching new framing to the opening. This would give us something to attach our exterior sheathing and our interior drywall to. And I keep reiterating this in my videos, but for this project and a lot of the projects that we're doing in this house, we've never done this type of thing before. And YouTube has been an invaluable resource for us. For all of the projects that we're doing, a lot of the time we have learned how to do them from watching other people do them on YouTube. Be sure to check the video description for any links to videos or other resources. I always try to link those things. I'm not a professional. I don't want to give you bad advice, but I do use YouTube a lot, and the things that I find helpful, I'll be sure to link those if that's something that you are looking for yourself. And of course, we also improvise on some things based on our unique situation or our experience level or our skill level. So anyway, just all things to keep in mind. We really enjoy doing things ourselves. We like figuring this stuff out. And when we bought this house, we bought it because we knew there were going to be a lot of projects that we could do ourselves on this house. And YouTube has been a really helpful resource for all of it. Get it? We will eventually be finishing this exterior side with a nicer finish. This wall is not exposed to the elements. It's just in our all seasons room, so we're not really worried about making it super weatherproof or anything right now. For now, we just want to make sure we keep out the pests. Are we sealed? The next day, I started cutting drywall to fill in all the holes from the soffits that I removed in previous episodes and the door that we just filled. And cutting drywall is so easy. I never knew it was this easy until I started this house project, but you basically just score it with an X-Acto knife, break it along the score line, and then cut the paper on the opposite side. Throughout this process, I have learned this about myself. I really enjoy making things. I mean, I already knew this. I already knew that I liked making and building things, but I like that so much more than destroying things, because when I was demolishing this kitchen, and I'm still not done demolishing the kitchen, as you can see, I still have a whole section of base cabinets that need to come out, but demolishing it was so much more stressful for me than putting it back together. Doing these types of projects, making something pretty again, troubleshooting a design problem, making something whole again, that makes me really happy. We also decided to add some extra blocking to our framing where we filled in the door, because our door was a little bit wide to get that 16 inches on center spacing for the framing. So we wanted to fill that in a little bit so that our insulation would fit more snugly into the framing. That's a good idea, babe. Look at that. Now we just gotta put our drywall in there. So my camera ran out of space while I finished installing that drywall over the door that we filled in. But I got that all screwed in last night, cleaned up, had some delicious meatball pasta from Costco for dinner. And today I am feeling refreshed and ready to start finishing some of this drywall. So I'm not gonna be finishing all of the drywall. I'm not gonna need to mud and tape all of the patches that I put in, because a lot of this is gonna be covered up by the cabinetry and some paneling that I'm gonna be putting on the wall. The drywall was already in pretty rough shape from the way that they had hung the cabinets, the way they had kind of painted everything. The cabinets didn't have any backing on them, so they just like kind of haphazardly painted the walls. The walls are very uneven. And then when I pulled off that melamine backsplash last week, it just kind of pulled off some of the paper from the drywall. So if I wasn't gonna be covering the drywall, I would definitely need to replace it. At one point I was thinking I might just cover it with more drywall, like a thinner 1/4 inch drywall. But I started looking back at some of my inspiration images for the kitchen that I want to put in here. I had a lot of this like shiplap beadboard paneling pinned in a lot of the images that I was, finding inspiration from on Pinterest. I am going to be covering most of the walls with that paneling. I'll be honest, like this week I was feeling so overwhelmed with what all needs to be done in this kitchen. We went to Home Depot and bought a bunch of the supplies, and like everything that we put on those enormous buggies, my anxiety started to kind of like tick up and up and up. I was like, wow, we're kind of spending some money here. Like I'm actually gonna have to build these cabinets, and I don't want to screw this up because this plywood is expensive. But then yesterday when I started working on patching the drywall, my confidence came back. I started feeling a lot more relaxed about the process and really started to enjoy the work of finishing this project. I kind of hit my stride a little bit. It felt pretty good. When my channel was mostly about sewing, there really wasn't any kind of sewing technique that I was afraid to try. Like I was like, let's just try it. Let's just see how it goes. If I mess up, I mess up. With projects like these, they feel like bigger, higher stakes projects. And I have definitely had a lot of anticipation, overwhelm, feeling a little scared sometimes to start some of these bigger projects, but once I get into it and start moving and start cutting and start doing the things, my anxiety level drops, my confidence comes back. So I'm feeling much better now moving forward. So anyway, I'm gonna get started. I'm kind of procrastinating because I don't really want to tape up all this stuff again, but I'm gonna tape up the plastic sheeting to help protect the areas outside of the kitchen. So this was the first drywall patch that I put in the ceiling, and I cut it just barely too big for the hole. So I used my multi-tool to kind of trim some of the edges so I could get it to fit up in there a little bit more snug. I also went around and scraped some of the edges where I had removed those soffits because there was some like caulking and just kind of rough edges where the drywall tape had been torn. So I just wanted to get that as smooth as possible before I started adding the drywall compound. Now, as I mentioned before, I am going to include some videos in the description of this video that I found really helpful for drywall finishing tips. Now, I'm a total noob to this whole process. I'm definitely not pro, not even close, but I was able to get a somewhat decent finish on this by the end of all of this, even though right now it looks really, really rough. And I actually really enjoyed this process a lot. This was very meditative for me, and it didn't take me that long. It really only took me a couple of hours for each of the steps of this process. Working on this drywall patching was one of those projects that I was able to just kind of relax and enjoy the process. It's the next day and I have let that initial coat with tape dry overnight. Now, I've never done this before, and I'll be honest, it looks a little rough right now, but I'll link the video in the description that I found that kind of helped me understand the process for doing this. Doesn't mean that my technique is perfect, but I did notice yesterday that my technique was kind of improving the more I did it. So today I'm going to be putting on the second coat of drywall compound over the taped sections. This coat, in my understanding, is meant to start to kind of smooth out those edges where the drywall was taped. So I did make a trip to Home Depot yesterday and I got a different size drywall knife. I got a drywall compound tray, to make it a little easier for scraping my knife off and getting the drywall compound out. This is going to be especially handy now that I'm going to be using a wider drywall knife for the second and third coats. I picked up a drywall sander, just the hand sander. I'm not going to be using the one on the pole just because I don't really have that much area to sand, and some sandpaper and that kind of stuff. So I don't think I have to sand this first step that I put up yesterday. So I may kind of smooth down a couple of spots that seem like, egregiously bumpy or, have like big chunks of drywall compound on them before I move on to this next step. There are bits that you can buy for a drill that are like a stirring bit, but all the ones that they had at the hardware store were way too big for this little bucket of drywall compound that I bought, so that's why I'm stirring this by hand. Having this tin to hold the drywall compound was actually so much more convenient. It's always funny to me when really simple tools and supplies like this just make the job so much easier. And I am using a bigger drywall knife here for this second step. I decided to go with a 10-inch knife. It just felt really comfortable in my hand, and I was able to maneuver the drywall compound around pretty easily with this one. And basically what I'm doing here is just putting the drywall compound on kind of thick and then trying to feather out the edges. Welcome to day 3 of finishing the drywall patches that I put in the ceiling. So this has dried overnight, the second coat, and it's actually kind of looking okay. There are a few spots that are going to be a little bit rougher than others, but I mean, for someone that has never done this before, I actually think it's turning out okay. A professional probably could have done it a little bit better, and maybe I'm gonna have to sand a lot more than a professional would have to. I think eventually I'll be able to get it to a pretty good place. So today I'm doing well, it's called a skim coat. I don't know how skim mine is gonna be because I still have some spots that I need to kind of smooth out, and it's possible that I may have to do one more coat to kind of get everything nice and smooth. So right now it looks a little crazy. It looks a little crazy in here, but I think eventually it's gonna look a lot better than it did before. So I'm gonna get back to it. Before putting on this third coat, I did go around and just kind of scrape off some of the high points, and then got back to the drywall compound. So the tin that I bought is a 12-inch tin. The knife that I already had, which I thought was 12-inch, was actually a 14-inch, so that's not gonna work. And I'm just going to use my handy dandy 10-inch knife for this third coat as well. And for this coat, I am putting on a somewhat thick layer of drywall to kind of fill in any gaps and kind of bridge the divides between the uneven surfaces, and then I'm going back and just scraping that off. And one of the tutorials that I linked below did a really good job of talking about how to do a skim coat and avoid a bunch of grooves from your knife in the drywall compound. So anyway, it's linked below. Be sure to check that out if this is something that you want to try for yourself. Once the third coat was finished, I was really starting to see this come together. And when it's wet, it's really hard to tell, especially with the light bouncing off the wet spots. But this is the next day when things had dried down completely, and you can see how much smoother this ceiling is starting to look. Like my confidence was definitely coming back for this, because in between each step, I would have serious doubts, and then I put another layer of that drywall compound on and it would look so much better. So I did go around and sand down some of the high spots, and I did put a little more drywall compound in just a few areas that were a little bumpy or ripply, but I lost the footage for that. I don't know where it went, but I had this footage. So this is after I actually sanded the entire ceiling where I had patched everything, and you can see that the dust is just everywhere. This day was a rough day for me because I was really frustrated by all of this dust, and you can't see it, but on the other side of that plastic sheet, I'm having a literal meltdown because I was tired, I was sore, I was dirty, I was frustrated with the dust, I was mad because I was too weak to switch out the attachments on the shop vac hose. I lost it. So anyway, this is me with a searing, burning rage for drywall dust while I vacuum up the drywall dust. This is me with a searing, burning rage for drywall dust while I spray it down and wipe down these counters. This dust gets everywhere, but I do not regret doing this myself, and I probably would do it again just because this is what's in my budget. And also I'm the kind of person that likes to do things myself. I just want to see if I can. I did eventually get it all cleaned up, but yeah, this last day dealing with the dust was the worst day of this whole project. Now, one thing I have learned about drywall dust is that if you can wet it, you can prevent the dust from getting everywhere. So I'm just going to spray down this drop cloth sheet really quick before I pull it down, just so the dust doesn't go flying all throughout the house. And that seemed to actually work pretty well. And I know that this is not a perfect job, and I know that I could probably do a skim coat on the entire ceiling. I'm not going to do that, at least not right now, but I am pretty pleased with how this turned out. I mean, there used to be enormous gaping holes in this ceiling, and now they're mostly concealed. I also haven't painted everything yet, and the drywall is probably still a little bit wet in some places, so it's going to look a lot more even once I get all the paint on too.